6 men once touched the same animal, at the same time, in the same courtyard, and then they nearly killed each other over what it was. None of them was lying. Every single one of them was telling the truth. That is the trouble with this story. That is the whole trouble with this story. This parable is very old, older than almost any story I could tell you. It comes from the north of ancient India, from the foothills below the Himalaya, and it was first written down more than 2,000 years ago. It appears in a Buddhist text called the Udana, a collection of short sayings attributed to the Buddha himself. But here is something worth knowing. The Buddhists did not invent this story. The Jains tell it too, though when the Jains tell it, the lesson is a little different. The Hindus tell it too, and centuries later, far to the west, the Sufi poets of Persia would tell it again, the poet Rumi among them. Only in their version, there is no king and there is no courtyard. In their version, the animal stands in a room that is completely dark, and the men who reach for it are not blind at all. They simply have no light. Which is, when you think about it, the same thing. It is a story that does not seem to care which century you live in, or which god you pray to, or whether you pray to one at all. And when a story is told by everyone, told and retold by faiths that agree on almost nothing else, that is usually a sign that the story is about something all of them are afraid of. So, let me tell you what they were all afraid of. In the city of Savatthi, there lived a king. He was not a cruel king. He was not a foolish king. But he was a king with a great deal of time. And a king with a great deal of time is a dangerous thing. What troubled this king was the wandering teachers. In those days, the roads of India were full of them. Holy men, philosophers, ascetics, monks of a dozen orders, each one walking from town to town with a different account of the truth. And the king, being a king, could summon any of them to his court and ask them his questions. So he did. He asked them the oldest questions there are. Is the world eternal, or did it begin? Does something in us survive the body, or does it not? When a wise man dies, does he continue somewhere, somehow, or is he simply gone? And the teachers answered him. One said the world was eternal and had always been. The next said, no, the world had a beginning and would have an end. One said the soul lived on after the body fell away. The next said there was no soul at all. One said the body and the soul were a single thing. The next said they could not possibly be, and that to confuse them was the error of a child. And every one of these teachers was certain, not hopeful, not searching, not thoughtful, certain. And every one of them, without exception, told the king that all the others were fools. The king listened to them for years, and one morning, tired of the noise of so much certainty, he had an idea. He turned to a servant and he said, "Go out into the city, find me every man who was born blind, every man who has never once in his whole life seen anything at all, and bring them here." By the afternoon, the servants had gathered them. 6 men, though in some tellings it is more, sometimes 10, sometimes a dozen. But let us say 6. 6 men who had been blind since the day they were born. They had never seen a colour. They had never seen the sun, though they knew its warmth. They had never seen a single face, though they knew the voices of everyone they loved. I want you to understand, before we go any further, that these were not foolish men. This is the part that careless tellers of this story get wrong. A man who has been blind from birth is very often the opposite of foolish. He has had to build a whole world out of touch and sound and patience and memory. He knows a room by the echo of his own footstep in it. He knows a friend by the weight of a hand on his shoulder. He has learned more carefully than most of us will ever bother to learn to trust exactly one thing, to trust what his own two hands tell him is there. Hold on to that. A lifetime of being right to trust your hands. That detail is the hinge of the entire story. The 6 men were led one by one into the great courtyard of the palace. They could feel the heat of the flagstones through the soles of their feet. They could hear somewhere ahead of them a slow, deep, patient breathing. Something very large was standing in that courtyard with them, and not one of them knew what it was. The king sat above the courtyard on a shaded balcony, where the 6 men could not see him, though of course they could not have seen him anywhere. And the king called down, "Friends, in the courtyard before you stands an animal. It is called an elephant. You have heard the word, perhaps, but none of you has ever touched one. None of you knows what one is. Here is what I ask of you," said the king. "Walk forward, reach out your hands, touch the elephant. Touch it carefully and thoroughly, and take all the time you need. And then tell me, tell all of us, what an elephant is." Now, the king meant this as entertainment. I will be honest with you about that, because the story is honest about it. The king was not, at this point, a wise man conducting a lesson. He was a bored man arranging a show. He expected to be amused. He expected the 6 blind men to disagree and to squabble and to say 6 silly things. And he expected to sit back on his cool, shaded balcony with a cup of something sweet and laugh at them, the way he could no longer quite let himself laugh at the teachers on the roads. He got his disagreement. He got far more disagreement than he had bargained for. But by the end of that afternoon, I am not certain the king was laughing. The first man walked forward until his outstretched hands met the elephant. What he found was the great flat side of the animal, an enormous wall of warm, rough, slowly moving hide. He spread both arms wide. He could not reach the top of it. He could not reach either end of it. He pressed his palms flat against it and felt it rise and fall with the animal's breath. "I understand now," said the first man. "An elephant is a wall, a great, warm, breathing wall." The second man walked forward, and his hands closed around one of the elephant's legs. It was thick. He could just barely link his fingers around it. It was solid and round, and it rose straight up like the trunk of a tree, and it ended far below in something broad and flat and rooted to the ground. "No," said the second man, "an elephant is not a wall. I am touching it right now. An elephant is a pillar. It is a living pillar. It is round like the great wooden columns that hold up a temple roof." "A wall," said the first man. "A pillar," said the second. And already you can hear it, can't you? Already, before the third man had touched anything at all, the two of them had begun to argue. The third man reached out and found the elephant's tusk. It was smooth. It was hard, harder than anything else he had touched on the animal. It was cool where the hide was warm. It curved. It came to a point. He ran his hand along its polished length, and he felt no skin, no hair, nothing soft at all. "You are both wrong," said the third man. "An elephant is not a wall, and it is not a pillar. An elephant is a spear. It is smooth and curved and hard, and it is sharp at the end." The fourth man had taken hold of the elephant's ear. It was wide, it was thin, it was soft and slightly rough, like a great leaf or a piece of heavy cloth. And as he held it, the elephant moved its ear gently, and the ear seemed to flap all on its own in his hands. "A spear does not move," said the fourth man. "I am holding the elephant, and it is moving. An elephant is a fan. It is a great, thin, living fan that moves the air." And the fifth man, the last of them to reach the animal, had found the elephant's trunk. It was the strangest thing of all. It was long. It was thick at one end and narrow at the other. It was warm and muscular, and, this is the part that frightened him, it moved. It curled. It reached back, and it touched him gently on the arm. "All of you are mad," said the fifth man, and his voice was shaking. "I have it here in my hands. An elephant is a serpent. It is a great thick snake, and it is alive, and it moves, and we should all of us step back from it right now." There was a sixth man. I have saved him for a reason. The sixth man had walked all the way around the animal to the very back of it, and he had taken hold of the elephant's tail. It was thin, it was rough, it hung down, it ended in a coarse little tuft of hair. He held it, and he frowned, and he listened to the other 5 men shouting, "A wall, a pillar, a spear, a fan, a serpent," and the sixth man began to laugh. "Listen to you," he said. "Listen to all of you. An elephant is none of those grand things. An elephant is a rope, a thin, frayed, ordinary rope. I am holding it. I would know." And that, the laughter, that was what finally did it. Because the other 5 men could bear being disagreed with. What they could not bear was being laughed at. So the first man, the one who looked to be working about naft, because the other 5 men could bear being disagreed with. What they could not bear was being laughed at. So the first man, the one who looked to be working about everything, the first man, the one who looked to be munch about free, just also for that is there being laughed at. So the first man, the one who looked to be a munch about 3, the long day is there being laughed at, because the other 5 men could bear being disagreed with and free. So the first man, the one who looked to be munch about free. The one who looked to be munch about free. They turned toward the sound of the laughter, and he shoved the sixth man hard in the chest. And the sixth man, who could not see the shove coming, none of them could see anything coming, fell backward into the fourth man. And the fourth man, startled, frightened, swung out blindly with his fists. And then all 6 of them were fighting. 6 blind men in a royal courtyard, striking at each other in the bright afternoon sun, each one of them swinging at a voice, at a guess, at a shape he could not see. Each one of them perfectly certain that he and he alone was defending the truth. Up on his cool balcony, the king had been laughing. At the start, he truly had been, but somewhere between the spear and the serpent, somewhere around the rope, somewhere in there, the king had gone quiet. Because the king, whatever else he was not a foolish man. And the king had spent years, you will remember, summoning the wandering teachers to his court and listening to them argue. And now he was sitting above 6 blind men fighting in his courtyard. And slowly, with a feeling like cold water going down his back, the king understood that it was the same fight. It was not a little like the same fight. It was not a rhyme of the same fight. It was exactly, precisely the same fight. The world is eternal. The world is not. The soul lives on. The soul does not. Every teacher with his 2 honest hands on one true piece of something far, far larger, and every teacher calling all the others fools. The king stood up. He called down into the courtyard, sharply now, not laughing at all. Stop! Stop! Step away from each other. You are all of you hurting each other over an animal that has not moved and has not harmed you and is standing there in perfect peace. And the 6 men, breathing hard, bruised, ashamed, stopped. The king came down into the courtyard. He walked to the 6 men, and he did not scold them. Instead, he did something kinder and much more useful. He took the first man by the wrist, gently, and he led him, step by step, all the way around the elephant. He placed the man's hand on the great breathing side. "This," said the king, "is the part you found. You were right. It is like a wall." Then he moved the same man's hand down onto the thick, round leg. "And this is the part he found. He was right too. It is like a pillar." And the king led the first man's hand to the tusk like a spear, and to the ear like a fan, and to the trunk like a serpent, and at last to the thin, tufted tail. "And like a rope, every one of you," said the king, "told me the truth. Not one of you told me a lie. And not one of you told me the elephant. Because the elephant," said the king, "is the wall, and the pillar, and the spear, and the fan, and the serpent, and the rope. It is all of those things at once. And it is also something none of you touched, the whole of it, the shape that holds all your pieces together." "You were not wrong," the king said softly. "Not one of you lied to me. You were only small. Your hands were honest, and your hands were true, and your hands were simply too small for the animal. As small, the king said, and his voice was very quiet now, as I am. As small as every teacher on every dusty road in my kingdom. I sat up on that balcony and I laughed at you, friends. And I should not have laughed, because I have been doing my whole life exactly what you did this afternoon. There is one last thing to know about this parable. We tell it usually as a story about other people. We tell it about the people we argue with. They are the blind men, we say. They have hold of the tail and think it is the whole beast. But that is not how the Buddha told it. And it is not how the king learned it. The king did not walk down into that courtyard and think how foolish those 6 men are. The king walked down and thought, I am the 7th. Because here is the hard edge of this story. You are not standing up on the balcony. You never were. You are down in the courtyard, in the dust, with the others. You have your own 2 honest hands pressed flat against one real, true piece of something far larger than you. A piece of a person you love. A piece of a faith. A piece of an old quarrel. A piece of how the world works. And what you are holding is true. It is genuinely, honestly true. Your hands did not lie to you. It is just that what you are holding is not the elephant. The blind men were not punished for being blind. None of us chose our blindness. They were only humbled for one thing, for believing that the small, true piece in their own 2 hands was the whole of the truth, and that everyone else was a fool. So the next time you are certain, truly, completely certain that you are right and the other person is a fool, reach out in the dark with your other hand. You may find there is more elephant.